Hey everybody, welcome back to Engaging the Phenomenon. Today we have a special guest, a huge friend of the channel, Vinnie Adams, the creator of Disclosure Team. So welcome, Vinnie.
Thank you for having me, James. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, and for people listening, Vinnie runs Disclosure Team, which I guess you can consider it like a UFO news media outlet. So is your name actually, is it Vinnie or is it Vincent?
No, it's Vinnie.
Okay, wow, really cool. Yeah, I always wondered that, right? So what is Disclosure Team? How would you describe Disclosure Team to people?
That's a really good question because since I started it, it just keeps evolving and changing slightly. You're right in saying it is kind of like a news and information outlet, but it all really just started as an Instagram page where I was just posting stuff that I found interesting, little tidbits of videos and information. And before long, I suddenly realized that a lot of people were paying attention to what I was posting. So I was like, oh, I might actually have to kind of do this for real and really, pay attention to what I'm posting and really sort of go for it. And it just evolved very quickly over the past 12 months into, I guess, an actual source for the very sort of latest stuff when it comes to, I'd say, more like the government side of things, the more nuts and bolts, and the military type side of the subject. But again, it's like I say, it's forever evolving. I have touched upon the kind of consciousness side of things and some more of the high strangeness. But yeah, we'll see. It could be a completely different another year down the line.
Yeah, and for people listening, what's some of the newest stuff that's going on with Disclosure Team?
Well, I mean, in the last few months, I became a member of UAP Media UK. So I'm doing, as well as the Disclosure Team, keeping up with the kind of news and current events. We're also doing like quite a bit of work behind the scenes at the moment with regards to engaging government in the UK, whether it be the intelligence agencies, also mainstream media, trying to get links with reporters and journalists, just to try and make sure that the correct kind of information gets put out to the public. I've also started researching again, which I hadn't done for quite some time. So I'm looking at kind of historic UFO programs and policies with regards to the Ministry of Defense, mainly sort of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, because we know at the moment here in the UK that they're not acknowledging the subject. They claim there's no interest whatsoever from anyone within MOD, which I personally find very hard to believe. So yeah, I'm doing that behind the scenes at the moment as we speak.
Yeah, and there was actually, I think it was Tim McMillan made a pretty interesting comment, saying something like that, the UK, at least the people in the intelligence community or some kind of seat like that, want the UFO issue to go away. Was it something like that?
Yeah, they're not talking about it in the UK, and I don't think they want other countries to talk about it either. Like, they're really trying to bury it at the moment. And I mean, there's so many possible reasons why, but it does, for me, with everything else I've looked into, it just seems that they're doing something, or they're looking into it and they've not quite figured it out, and they want to keep it behind closed doors for the time being.
Yeah, and one of the major cases over there was the Rendlesham Forest case. That's like, everything, even though they released a lot of the UFO files. I remember a few years ago they were like, oh, we're releasing these files, and there's thousands and thousands of documents being released. But when it came to Rendlesham, they couldn't find anything.
Yeah, convenient, isn't it? That seems to be a running theme. There's, Rendlesham is probably one of the biggest cases globally, let alone in the UK. And I still feel there's still a lot we don't know or haven't heard about that. It's not a simple case of they put some of the files out, they couldn't find the others, let's move on. It's very strange. But then there's also other cases that have sort of happened around that same sort of time. We've got the Calvine case in Scotland, which was another one that to this day a lot of researchers are still kind of confused by. Where are these photographs? And yeah, there's just so many loose ends that the MOD just hasn't tied up.
Yeah, and is Rendlesham like a big case for you, being from the UK?
It has been in the past. It's not something I've looked into for a few years now, because it got to that point where I just felt like I was going around in circles with my research, not being able to get to the, I'm not saying I was trying to get the actual final answer, because I knew that was probably not going to happen, but it's these, like you say, the missing documents, just not enough information being put out there officially. It just got to that point where it's like, well, I'll have to pick this up in a few years' time if we get any new information or anybody come forward.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting. I believe it was during the To the Stars Academy unidentified TV series. Somebody did a close up on some files that Luis Elizondo or Tom DeLonge were reading, and it said something about materials recovered from Rendlesham.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of speculation around that, because there are certain researchers out there who have spent a lot of time, even years, on the case, saying there was no material or radioactive ground or anything left behind. But then there are some that do say that, and again, this is what I'm saying, when there's still loose ends that can't be tied up, and then there's the multiple witnesses from the event. Some people don't believe some of them, and
Yeah,
others it's kind of like there's two camps. So it's just a messy case to this day.
yeah, it was very divisive. I remember, yeah, there's a lot of fallout and arguments about from some of even the people involved.
Yeah,
And but it is a tremendously important case. You got people who had the biological effects, right? The 6 observables. You had a lot of the observables there, and it's, again, the biological, it's basically physical evidence of somebody in close proximity to UAP.
yeah, absolutely. And then there was issues with medical records being covered up and hidden, and they would, I think it took a lot I think John McCain had to get involved to get some of the medical records released. And when it goes that far, it does point in the direction of like, what is being hidden and what are they not telling us? So it just adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah, and I believe John Burroughs didn't even get his records, but he was able to get them reviewed by a doctor who had a top secret clearance, I believe, Dr. Kit Green. Right. And it took that for Green to look at the information and be able to say, listen, you got to do this A, B, and C, and somehow he knew what to do somehow. Which is a miracle, probably saved John Burroughs' life. But I wonder how he knew what to do in that situation either. That's pretty interesting. But let's circle back a little. For people listening, some people on this channel are gonna know you for sure. Some people are gonna already be subscribed to your YouTube and Instagram and follow you already. But for the people that are not too familiar with Vinnie Adams, what got you into all this?
Oh man, that goes back a long way. I mean, as a kid, I'm a child from the late 70s, so hitting sort of 4 or 5 years old, Star Wars was the first thing that I sort of latched onto. So the whole sci-fi world was something that came to me at a very early age. E.T., the extraterrestrial, Close Encounters, things like that. So I was just an avid sci-fi follower for all of my growing up years and things like that. And then getting into sort of my teens and that, I very early kind of picked up on like UFO documentaries and things like that. And it was just, I just had so many questions. I think, like a lot of people that are in this subject from an early age, just needed more. And then I guess life gets in the way. Teenage years, you're out doing other things with friends. But then again, in my 20s, I kind of picked it back up, and that's when I then was watching documentaries, but then going and trying to do a bit of research, looking at declassified documents and things like that, as best I could, because obviously there weren't as many around back then. But it just snowballed, really. The more and more I saw things, the more questions came up. So the more research I tried to do. And I mean, it wasn't like proper academic research, but it was just trying to dig past, the documentaries. That was never enough. So yeah, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Was there anything that kind of just did it for you, where you're like, there's there's something, I know this is real kind of thing. Was there any kind of point or moment like that for you, where it was like a defining moment where you're like, you had to look further into it?
There wasn't anything like that that stood out until 2017, which I think is the same for most people, really, or a lot of people. That really kind of hit home. I think sort of around a decade ago, I was watching a lot of Richard Dolan lectures and things like that. And that really got me on that track of I've got to keep paying attention to this now, because I really, something with Dolan resonated with me, and like this guy knows what he's talking about. It seems like he's got a few controversial things these days, possibly. I mean, that's just up for debate and things like that. But so I followed Dolan's work for a long time. And then, of course, like I said, when 2017 hit, I saw the TTSA, I think it was in October 2017, when they all stood up on that stage, introduced the team. And then obviously December hit. My daughter had just been born that month as well, like a few days before the New York Times article. So my head was just exploding that year. But yeah, that really solidified for me that, yeah, the train's picking up speed. I'm gonna ride it all the way.
And how did you, I guess you came across that on the internet, right? Because you're in the UK. And I mean, how big was that in the UK? I'm in the US. So there was something of a media barrage over here. And, I'm in New York. So New York Times, I mean, I guess New York Times anywhere in the US, but really, there was a small kind of like media wave in the US. But you found it through the internet and everything?
Yeah, I was paying attention to the US press more, and I still do, more than I do the UK, because there was a small wave over here of the same stories, but it's always a week or two later. So yeah, I was lucky that I think it was the night of, I can't remember what the date was, if it was it the 17th or something like that. But yeah, so I think that night I was just checking through the US press on my phone. I was laid in bed and it was there, and I just was like, oh my goodness, it's all coming out. So yeah, very happy.
Is there any speculation as to why the UK is so standoffish on this? I mean, it's, and as somebody in the UK, how do you, as a citizen in the UK, for them to kind of undermine the issue, how does that make you feel?
It's not surprising. I think it's the English way. We're as a people, as a country, we're very set in our ways, very old school. So it doesn't surprise me. They try and be prim and proper, like a true Englishman, and all that kind of stuff. And so they don't want to talk about fringe topics, not just UFOs, but anything that's outside the norm. They really have an issue with being very open and direct with. And then as far as the reporting it in the media being late, it's just another thing where the UK just follows pretty much everything the US does. It's like we're the baby brother who kind of does things a bit after. So yeah, it didn't surprise me, and it doesn't surprise me to this day that they're trying to withhold stuff or not be fully transparent about what they're looking into. But I think their time will come. I don't think they can keep it hidden, and I think they'll realize that soon enough.
Yeah, and I'm obviously, again, I'm in the US. I don't understand the culture in the UK as much, but isn't it like, are there younger reporters and media people who are kind of hungry for this at all, where it's like the older generation's doing the old thing and the newer generation wants to step in and just take over and kind of push things through their vision? Is there a bit of that at all?
There is. We're seeing it recently with the guys at UAP Media UK. We are talking regularly to some of the younger journalists. Now, we've kind of found our way into some of the tabloids that don't have a lot of respect over here, because they do post a lot of clickbaity, some would say some false articles, but we're trying to ensure that anything UFO related is reported on correctly. So we're making some headway there. We're obviously trying to get into the bigger, more respected papers like the Guardian and the Telegraph and things like that. But I think all in good time, hopefully we'll get there. But it's going to be we're going to have to be persistent with them, I think. But there are a lot of young reporters trying to get the story out there. I think they're getting a little bit of pushback from their editors and editors-in-chief who are probably still of that old school kind of reporting. So yeah, I think we're starting to see the ball move a bit further down the road, though, with regards to the reporting, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, in the US, a lot of it was like one news place reported on it, so the other people felt like they had to report on it, otherwise they're going to be left in the dust, kind of thing. So even they just had to report on it, and so they were citing other sources and stuff. But there were certainly, you know, there were certainly some younger people who stepped in and really were pushing the story in a pretty big way. But of course, you know, Ralph Blumenthal, Leslie Kean, Helena Cooper, that story really broke everything. And Leslie had been reporting for many years on UAP. You know, she did that book where I believe John Podesta wrote the forward. And, you know, John Podesta was involved with, you know, to the story, or at least, you know, Tom DeLonge and all those guys. So
Sure.
and yeah, and again, Podesta was involved. He did, so you know, the disclosure project was in 2001.
Yeah.
And then every few years, almost every year after that, there was some kind of similar conference, and John Podesta spoke at the 2002 conference, and he
Wow, I
gave
didn't know that.
yeah, I mean, he gave a short kind of like introduction speech. And yeah, Leslie Kean was actually really influential. If you look really closely at the Disclosure Project interviews with all those witnesses, like all those old ones from the 90s, you'll see Leslie Kean's hair, you'll hear her voice. She did a lot of those interviews. Yeah, that was actually, there's a lot going on back then in the 90s. And yeah, so Leslie Kean, I think, was probably helpful in that taking place. But yeah, John Podesta, this is in 2002. He's saying, you know, the people should be told the truth. They ought to be told the truth because it's the right thing. Number one, because it's the law, and because they can handle it. So that was it's crazy to think that's almost 20 years ago now.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But
I knew he was obviously in. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, obviously, I was aware with the Podesta and the Tom DeLonge thing, and obviously the emails and his connection with the Clintons and that. I think I'd heard like things about him being involved, you know, previously. I didn't realize he'd kind of been as involved as you just mentioned. So that's something for me to go and find.
Oh, well, actually, you know, it's Rockefeller Initiative. If you look into that, you know, Steve Bassett did a lot of really good work collecting all that. And again, controversial. Stephen Greer was doing all those briefings in the 90s, but John Podesta was in the Clinton administration during the 90s when Greer was giving all those briefings. And even Ron Pandolfi at that point was running the Weir desk. And there was a briefing, and he said, I can't do the briefing for, you know, whatever plausible deniability. So he had Bruce Maccabee do a briefing. I forget for which presidential house that was. Yeah, I guess it was the Clintons, but it was for the Clinton scientific board.
Right.
But Podesta was definitely kind of like in the loop, and I'm not sure if he was at the Rockefeller Ranch, but you know, back then at the Rockefeller Ranch, you know, there's a picture. It shows Dr. Stephen Greer, Robert Bigelow, Linda Moulton Howe, John Mack.
Yeah.
So if John Podesta was not there, I'm sure he was privy to what was going on and some of the testimony. And you know, obviously, we have people like the late great Dr. Edgar Mitchell was definitely involved in that stuff. So, but yeah, what do you think it's going to take for something like that in the UK, that where it's going to, like, you think there'll be like a conversion to where, like, in the US at some point there was like, you couldn't, you know, a few days couldn't go by without a new UFO story? You think that's going to happen in the UK?
I think what it's going to take to start switching things up here is what we've been seeing right now at the moment, with things going through the Senate for the Gillibrand amendment to the HR 4350 as part of the NDAA bill. I think it's going to take something like that, actually getting it through, passed and signed into law, getting this new UAP office up and running, which obviously will be quite public facing. It's going to be an official office with hopefully classified and unclassified public reports. I think once the UK sees something like that, then there'll be a turnaround. But until anything like that happens, I can see them just dragging their feet even further.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be more from the UK when there was the UAP task force and the report came out. I was expecting, and again, the 60 Minutes. I mean, that was just such a huge media piece. It was like, wow, that was incredible. I'm still amazed how well I think that went.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we will. I think there probably has been some sharing of information, maybe not so much with the task force, but through the intelligence agencies, definitely coming from the UK and to America, and any of the Five Eyes, kind of Australia as well, who are also seem to be quite quiet on the subject at the moment. I think it'll all happen at the same time. I think the UK, Australia, they'll all start talking probably, and I'm hoping next year. We'll see.
Yeah, that's kind of the funny thing. It's not like as if they don't know. We know that they know. We know that they know that there's something real to this, and they have. I say every government, especially all the major kind of big governments with big militaries, all have a tremendous body of classified data. You know, again, maybe pictures, radar tracking, military reports. I think they all have it, so they know it's real, and they've probably exchanged a bit with, again, the U.S. and other intelligence services. So we know they know. It's just, this game of, what is it going to be proper? Because once you go down that road and you publicly acknowledge it and say it's real, you kind of you can't stop there at that point, I feel. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's, it's been going on in the US, and it's been incredible to see, and again, thanks to people like Lua Lozando and Christopher Mellon and the people that had supported them to do what they're doing and protected them maybe in some ways. So I'm really hoping, I'm really hoping to see the UK and Australia and other countries really pick this up. There's been small things here and there, but I mean, imagine we get like some kind of global media wave consistently, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think other things like Project Titan coming out of San Marino, if that hits the UN in the near future as well, I think that'll open a lot of eyes in Europe.
Yeah,
to kind of come forward and realize that it's okay to talk about this within the ranks of government and through into the military and intelligence agencies. Again, I think they're just waiting for that one big thing to happen where they can go, now we can talk about it, and then we see it flooding out of every corner of the globe.
Yeah, and speaking of, you were in the UK. You were in the UK, but you met up with the UAP UK or Media UK and Lou Elizondo. What was that? What was going on there?
That was obviously I've spoken to Lou a few times on my YouTube channel, and he'd let me know a few months ago that he was going to be in London, and I was speaking to his wife Jennifer as well, and they were just like, yeah, it'd be great to meet up, and I was like, of course, that'd be fantastic. I'll love that. So I spoke to the guys, and I was like, look, should we head down to London and arrange something, meet Lou, and it turned into we got an Airbnb for 3 days. We went down and we were able to go to the National Archives, look at some documents, get to know each other. The guys at UAP Media UK, we hadn't really met before face to face. So that was a good kind of team bonding, living in one house together for a few days. That was awesome. And then, we timed it so that we got to hang out with Lou for a few hours as well, which was eye-opening.
Yeah. What was it like meeting Lou in person?
It was great. I mean, he's a big important person to what I do. I stand by his work and what he does. Obviously there's a lot of people out there that think there's something dodgy about him, or that he's still against disclosure and he's controlling the narrative. I don't buy any of that. So for me, it was like genuinely like an honor to meet him, and it was a great conversation. And yeah, couldn't have gone any better. It was just, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so what other developments that do you see that are going on right now that you think are important?
I think it's all with everything we're seeing right now, with everything going through the Senate and Congress and all that. I think I still am a big proponent for individual members of the public to contact their representatives as well. It's a big message that we've seen Luis Jimenez push with his Big Phone Home initiatives. And I really subscribe to that as well, because I think we can all play our part in this process, however small it may seem. And that goes for the people here in the UK as well. We here at UAP Media UK, we have templates and a very similar thing going on where people can contact MPs and that over here. I just think it really does add up and really help push the subject forward. It gets more people talking. I think that's another thing that I am a really big fan of, is just getting the conversation normalized, whether it be your friends and family who probably wouldn't normally talk about this kind of thing. If we see that spreading, then I think that's just normalizes it in everyday life. I think that'll just help. And it might have to be the small things like that while we wait for these big things that we hope will occur in the near future. It's a tough one. Because I don't like to get too excited about possibilities and maybes. So
Yeah.
it's you got to keep your expectations at a reasonable level, and then but still put in a bit of work as well.
Yeah, it's incredible, because I mean, I remember like 2010, and it was like there were UFO conferences and stuff. The UFOs and nukes in 2010 was huge. That was a big moment. But up prior to that, the kind of big thing was the Disclosure Project, and then again the 2010 UFOs and nukes. And I remember watching that live. I thought that was huge, but then again, obviously, a week later, it's like on to the next thing, and it's just the UFO people that were really into it. But then the citizens hearing happened, and that I thought was big, and that actually got a little more media. So it's been decades of like, don't get your hopes up, because I remember seeing these different I hate to say it like this because I'm an experiencer, but these UFO witnesses come forward that had such an amazing story, and you think that something might happen with it or something, but it just ends up being a hoax or a dud, or just doesn't go anywhere. So it's actually pretty incredible to see what's going on now. And it's, we're in uncharted territory. We have things going on like the Galileo project with Avi Loeb, and it's almost like I don't know what to make of, if something is coming along, if it's actually going to make a big impact, or but it's hard to see the momentum being lost at this point.
I think there's obviously, we hear all the time that there's things happening in the background, but for the everyday folk, it's like if they don't see it happening, then it just feels like there's a real stagnant, it's like frozen, that nothing's happening, nothing's moving along, we're stuck in a rut. But then every now and then we do see little things. So like you just said, the announcement of the Galileo project back in July was a really positive thing. But then, in real terms, they're obviously still in the early stages of acquiring the equipment they need with the funding that they've probably only recently got a lot of and are still working on. And then we heard back in the summer of things like Skyfall, this new think tank with Jake and Jesse and Sean Cahill. And, we've yet to see anything publicly about what they're doing, which I think a lot of people might feel is like a frustrating thing. But, these things take time. And for me, that's okay. And I do sometimes have to kind of remind people that that's the case, and it's not to just expect big things every day, because we saw such a big momentum in the summer with the build up to the UAPTF preliminary assessment. Everyone was excited. We had multiple media stories daily. Everyone is really just lapping it up, and then it just went quiet. And I think that's when I noticed a lot of people switch and frustrations were starting to be vented, especially across things like UFO Twitter and that. So yeah, we need more reassurance that things are happening, I think.
Yeah, and I think it was nice to hear Bill Nelson, the NASA chief, to make some pretty interesting comments. And saying, yeah, he was on the Armed Services Committee. He was briefed on the UAP stuff in the classified setting, and it's interesting to see that all the people that you see, different senators and people who were briefed in the classified setting, none of those people that have really come forward in the public that are talking, being interviewed, have undermined the subject. It's interesting that the people that have gotten the classified briefings are all basically pro, this needs to be looked into.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the quicker that happens and the ball and the momentum keeps rolling and we get something set up where it goes beyond looking into just military cases, because I've said a lot of times, and a lot of people do, that the everyday folk who have had experiences and that their voices seems to have been really pushed to the background, and that's just obviously not fair at all. I think the focus needs to shift away from all of this government and military aspect to really focus on the everyday folk who have struggled with what might have happened to them and their families and their everyday lives. And that's something that I have to again remind myself of when I'm so focused on looking at these official aspects of it with the government, and that that it's not just about that. So I'm actually working with a couple of experiences at the moment to try and bring their stories forward, and that's something I'm going to hopefully do this side of Christmas, fingers crossed. But yeah, that's like why I was saying, I've tried to kind of evolve as a channel, as a page, as a person when it comes to researching the subject. I say researching, looking into the subject. So yeah, something new, experiences, because it's something I've never experienced or seen anything.
Oh, well, that's a great question. I was going to ask you that. You answered it. Did you see the recent interview I did with Project Unity J?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got into my story a little bit there. And that's kind of, those are some highlights. That's not even, I couldn't possibly, talk about the last, whatever, almost 15 years.
Right.
But yeah, I understand that. And, I'm, as somebody, I guess, who's in that community, I get it. Like, but I understand the emphasis on the military stuff. It's, it's a tough line to walk, just because, especially not, I don't think so much for the people in the UFO community. I think the people in the UFO community are generally open to listening to experiencers, but it's the tough part is the general public, because that's, every time there's been a story like that, that's when they're playing the X-Files music and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And when 2017 came out and they were talking about UFOs officially, that diminished from the military side. But when it comes to, a lot of, there's been a lot of reports of like local sightings, and even the O'Hare case, right?
Yes.
That was kind of like downplayed. And there hasn't yet been a push in the media to look at everyday people, who make up this world, basically, are everyday people who make up the entire world. There hasn't been there really hasn't been a push or an acknowledgement yet publicly where those people, or people like me, will be taken seriously yet. But I think, that's definitely going to be coming sometime soon. And we did Crash Retrieval Week, where we have another themed week coming, probably in December, and it actually is perfectly in line with what you're going to be doing. So maybe we should talk about that.
Yes, definitely.
But and you said you're going to have Richard Dolan on soon?
Yes. So the new documentary, The Observer's, just released. I think it was actually today. So I was speaking to the people over at The Observer's about doing an interview with someone who featured in the documentary. So I was straight away, I was just like, Richard Dolan, I haven't spoken to Richard yet. I've been wanting to speak to him forever. So yeah, that's lined up for, I'm just waiting for a final confirmation, but I think it's only just over a week away if everything goes to plan.
And then, so Richard's going to be on your channel?
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to watching the documentary too.
Yes, yeah, I think, there's a bit of controversy surrounding some of the production team and what they've done in the past, but I'm not one to judge until I've actually seen it. We've seen who's going to be in it. So to me, yeah, I give everything a try,
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on, so you're going to be doing the thing with some experiencers this coming month. What are some of your thoughts on the phenomenon?
Good question.
What do you think? What do you think we're dealing with here?
Well, it gets harder and harder to answer that question for me because, I do kind of come from what you might say a nuts and bolts background, thinking it's just a physical craft that's behind all these things. But then we look and see recently when we kind of got the new information about Orsap and James Lukatsky and a lot of the high strangeness that was studied in the Orsap program for those 2 years, the 2 main years, that now I'm further away from an answer than I've ever been. And the kind of extraterrestrial hypothesis is almost taken a little bit of a backseat for me, where I'm looking more into the kind of ultra terrestrial interdimensional thing, or even time travel, us from the future. That's really taken a prominent stance in a lot of people at the moment. So yeah, my desk with all the possibilities on it is just growing and growing at the moment. So, which I quite like in a way, because it's good to have options and keep everything on the table until more evidence or data comes out. So yeah, it's just keeps me busy, keeps me thinking.
Yeah. And do you think it's like a singular phenomenon, or you think we're dealing possibly with?
Oops, sorry,
phenomenon.
my Apple Watch is talking. I think it's more likely to be multiple things, because there's so many different things been reported over the generations and decades and millennia. If it's one thing, it's one very big thing that has a multitude of how they appear, how they look, and what they can do. It's crazy, so it does, to me, point in the direction of multiple different things. But again, I don't really know.
Right. I mean, even for me, right, I've experienced a variety of different phenomena, and I can't really pin it down. I'd like to think, yeah, I have a good idea because I've had experiences, but if anything, I'm almost more baffled in a sense, because some of the experiences I've had have different qualities to them, right? So it makes me lean in the direction of we're probably dealing with different phenomena. But again, at the end of the day, I don't know. Jacques Vallée has proposed some very interesting ideas, like a meta control system and appearing the different ways. And I know, Dr. Gary Nolan made some really interesting comments on Twitter in the past few days, and it's like, all those, Hal Puthoff and Dr. Kit Green, Colm Kelleher, all these brilliant people, Dr. Eric Davis, they don't seem to quite have it figured out either. And they are, been working together on this behind the scenes for decades, trying to solve this puzzle. And it seems like like the greatest minds that we're aware of that are looking into this are just as curious.
Yeah, completely agree, man. They're the people that I really, when I see something put out from those guys, I get really excited, that, because we don't hear from them all the time, like you said, Gary Nolan put something out this week and I was like, haven't seen anything from him in a while, and I'm sure they're so busy with their research and doing the real work behind the scenes. So yeah, it's comforting in a way for me, knowing that we've got people like that looking into it. They'll let us know if they find anything.
Well, and Dr. Diana Pasulka is back on the scene. She disappeared
Yeah,
for a little while. Seems she's back in the public, and it seems like she's very open to sharing her ideas, and she doesn't feel as restrained. I guess with all the pressure with American Cosmic and
yeah,
everything that you know that happened after the book came out and
sure,
the repercussions. So I'm really looking forward to what she has to say. But then,
definitely.
we also have those papers coming out on the materials soon. I
That'd be
believe someone,
interesting. I think a lot of people talk about the materials still as like, what's going on? We haven't heard anything about any materials for a while. So yeah, I think that'd be really interesting.
yeah. So there's that, and then I guess there's the experiencer study that Kit Green and Dr. Gary Nolan were doing, and I'm sure that there's I'm sure that there's follow up for that too.
Yeah, I've
You
had
know,
a few
so
conversations with people about that with regards to that work that Kit Green and that are doing, and I think it's probably quite a big project from what I've heard. There's a lot of things involved with that. So again, it's another one of those things that's happening behind the scenes that we rarely hear about in the public domain. So that's what keeps me content knowing that these things are happening. But like I said, that's not good enough for the public that don't get to hear about these things. So,
what
it's tough.
so when we say everything goes as planned and we have the new office, the anomaly surveillance and resolution office, what do you think realistically is going to happen? What are some of your thoughts on that?
It's hard to say what I think will happen. What I think is good that you've got the Aerial and Transmedium Advisory Committee, which will feature like outside entities such as people from the Galileo project, the SCU, and other things like that, that just give it some real weight. It's not just relying on an internal department or group to kind of go out and try and gather all the information from the multiple agencies that have who could possibly been sitting on some information for decades, and they're kind of reluctant to give it up. I think there's going to be a bit more oversight as well, though, which is a good thing. We've got who is it? Let me think. People like the FAA and Department of Energy coming, going to be required to give more. NOAA, the DHS, all these agencies that have kind of probably got away with it or didn't get pressed by the UAP task force, last year and things like that. I think with a bit more oversight on those kind of agencies, I think we're more likely to get the information, and then let's just hope it's put into the unclassified reports that we hope are going to come as well. So hard. I could easily say what I want to see, whether we'll get it or not. That's the thing, But I don't think they could add any more to this new office through this bill and amendments and that, with all the geospatial intelligence, signals intelligence, featuring things like the health effects and that. There's a lot in there. There's a lot to digest. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seemed that that was very informed language. They knew what they were looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was funny. Yeah, there's the picture of Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon today outside the Capitol. That was really cool.
Yes, so, I mean, like Lou said, I think when he tweeted the picture that they're there doing their work for the people, that they're on our side, and yeah, it's just a great thing that they're there. I'd imagine that they're really pushing senators and people to really get behind the amendments and the bills to co-sponsor. Maybe it's hard to say. I'm speculating, but it can only be a good thing for the UFO community that they're there doing that.
Yeah, and what do you think of we talked about the stuff that's kind of buried, possibly in Air Force and again all these different agencies. Do you think any of that is going to come into question, or it's going to have to be new information that's acquired?
Yeah, I'm not very confident, because I believe if there are these crash retrievals that are hidden away, I think they're they're not necessarily even in black projects. I think they're in the gray, somewhere lying somewhere buried between military and private aerospace organizations, just in very, very small, tiny compartments, that are just hidden away with very, very little people that know, who are in the need to know. So I don't put a lot of weight on that coming out.
Yeah.
Certainly not at the forefront of new information, but that's just how I see it. Low expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what, the thing is too, at some point though, I would think that at some point you're going to have to address Roswell, right? You
Yeah.
can, there's going to be a point where they can no longer say we don't know what happened, or you know what I mean, or it's classified, or I think there's got to be a point where something happens that has to be addressed on some level publicly,
Yeah, and I think with the UAPTF reports last year, even the classified ones, only focusing on cases from kind of the last year and a half, except obviously the Nimitz case was in there as well. But pretty soon they're going to be digging back decades. And if these people are sitting on information, especially the Air Force, and they're being asked for it, I mean, they're going to have to give it up, which is exciting.
Yeah, and again, that's there's a lot of fascinating cases, over the last 80 years, and I'm sure there's some that we have never even heard of, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the talk about Starfish Prime, from the 60s, which was allegedly a true case. I don't know what it's going. That's almost going to Richard Dolan. He wrote that book After Disclosure.
Sure.
Which was a great book. I think it's going to take something like a true disclosure event, if we could even call it that. I don't know. How do you see disclosure rolling out? What we call disclosure.
Well, that's the thing. I've thought about this for many years, and people talk about the capital D disclosure, the acknowledgement from a president stood in front of a podium disclosing. I've never really put any kind of weight behind that happening, but then we've got a mass sighting, something that just cannot be denied. It's in this modern day and age, with the way things are, you can't really cover up a huge mass sighting these days. There's a possibility you could have leaks or insiders coming forward, whether it be anonymous or just breaking rank, breaking NDAs. It's hard to say. There are so many avenues it could come from or go down. So yeah, I don't know. I'd be speculating if I said it's going to come from one or the other.
Well, it's interesting too, because the phenomenon could end the entire secrecy, at least not the cover up, but it could make itself known at any point in time overtly to the citizens. So that's always on the table. So I sometimes wonder, why has there been this push recently? I know obviously it's because people are making sacrifices and dedicated their efforts to this. We wouldn't have had that without them doing that. But people have talked about it before. It feels like even with that occurring, somebody somewhere flicked the green light and said, okay, we're going to give this a go for whatever reason.
Yeah, could be. I mean, we also see a younger generation of politicians and even military leaders these days. I mean, I think a lot of the old guard are retired or passed away even now. So maybe it's just a new generation who feel that what happened in the past many decades ago was obviously awful for the American people and everyone around the world. Maybe it's time to kind of stop being so secretive and things like that. I mean, again, I'm just speculating, but that kind of, you notice that a lot of the younger people are the ones talking in government and that, your Rubios and things. They're not your old gray hairs that we've seen in the past. So, I always think that could be a small aspect of it.
Yeah. And what is there something that you think is going to for sure happen in like the next year or two?
I don't know, man. I think if everything goes to plan with the office, getting in, that's going to be great. But I just have these ideas that we're going to see more leaks, whether it be photos or videos that we've heard about, or whether it's things we haven't heard about, whether it's people who have worked in programs in the past coming forward. That'd be great. You know, we didn't expect Lukatsky to come forward, and he popped out of nowhere. Might happen again next year, might happen 2 years down the line. So again, it could come from anywhere. The next step, I'm not saying disclosure, I'm just saying the next step, or the next thing that we can dig our teeth in as researchers and people who follow the subject, and even the public, for them to give them further hope that it's all moving in the right direction, you know?
Yeah, and I know you're speculating about, people possibly coming forward, but if you had to speculate even further, would you speculate that the people that could possibly come out are people that are kind of like breaking NDAs, or just that they're just coming forward officially publicly?
Could be a multitude of things. It could be military, someone who may have retired from the military, whether it be a Navy pilot, for example, or an Air Force pilot who might have experienced something and never had to sign it off, like how Commander Fravor and Alex Dietrich are able to talk about what happened. Could it be something like that? Absolutely. That would be fantastic, because no one gets in trouble. We all get to hear about a new case that's compelling, hopefully. That's the kind of avenue I'd want to see it coming from. So that'd be great. If you see people breaking NDAs, then you worry about their livelihoods, their families, and things like that,
Well, and also the potential to shut the conversation down, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Being like, this is getting too dangerous now with all this public talk about UFOs. So, you know what? Actually, we're just gonna make everything classified. So that's a problem too. I know people just want some of these people to come forward and tell everything, but that might actually not help the bigger conversation going on.
Right. Yeah.
They might have to put something new into effect where it's like, okay, this is only going to happen on the classified level now. Sure. So, there's a genuine concern for that. And I know people don't want to hear that, but this, that's the reality of the situation. That's what we're dealing with here. So, we got to take what we can. And again, I do think it is progress. We're in a much better place in a conversation as far as the UFO subject goes on a global level. We haven't had like 1/100th of these type of conversations before 2017. It was just, the UFO community. Now, we have scientists engaging, and, the chief of NASA is very outspoken about the possibilities of UAP, and, former CIA directors going on the record. We're definitely in a better place. And what do you think about when people are talking about like, oh yeah, this is all some kind of controlled disclosure? What are your thoughts on that?
I hear it all the time, and it's like it's still part of a maybe psychological operation to bring it out in a certain way with a certain narrative attached to it. And I didn't put much weight behind it, because how can they show that or prove that? It's just their opinion, which is absolutely fine. I have no problem people having differences of opinion. But for me, I speak to people like you. I speak to many people who are involved in this, and that's kind of where I tend to listen to more than a random people that jump into my DMs here and there going, oh, this is this is a psyop. This is, like you just said, a completely controlled, drip-fed government plan. I don't have time to focus on that kind of thing, unfortunately. I'm aware that it's a possibility, of course, but again, speaking to the right people behind the scenes, I've made some great connections, and they continue to grow, and I have great conversations. But yeah, I don't know. I'm an optimist as well. I'm very optimistic about the way things are going. I think I'm looking at things with the right eyes. I'm not blinded by things. Time will tell, I suppose. But with regards to something you just said a minute ago as well, you know, with people, we had 75 years of it just doing nothing. We've had 4 years of it just going, like, in my opinion, up and up and up, and we can kind of wait a little bit longer, you know. If a lot of people have to wait 75 years, and we shouldn't expect too much in 4 or 5 years, it's probably good that it's being brought out slower, just because it can be managed, you know, the reality can be managed. And I don't know, I always wonder what it would be like if it was just thrown out there, like, for the whole public, and it's like, here you go, one day you wake up and the world's a completely different place because it's all true and real and in your face. I think that's kind of a bad thing.
Yeah. And you know, I was just actually going to get into that. What'd you make of Lou Elizondo's comment about, you know, the kind of disclosure being somber?
Difficult. There are so many ways you could kind of read into that. I try not to, because it could mean that he's got information that says it's probably not what we want to hear, or it's something negative, or maybe it's just the process could be dragged out, and so we're going to be somber because we're going to be waiting again. You know, I don't know. I don't like to kind of read so far into something that I'm completely off the ball completely, because I've gone, right, he means this when actually he meant that. I try not to pay too much attention or put too much focus on that and dwell on it.
And so how do you think people would react if there was, like, you know, say next week, or say on Thanksgiving, United States, somebody president or somebody announces to the world, you know, UFOs are real and they're another intelligence. How do you think the world would take that?
I think it would be a mixture of excitement and panic. I think we'll see every aspect of, you know, the spectrum of emotion and feelings from different people around the world. For me personally, my first question would be, right, now can we figure out the intent? Because it might all be great, we've got the answers, but wait a minute, are they actually here for good, or is there some nefarious reason now? That would be my initial thought. But I think globally we'd probably see a bit of panic in the streets. We'd probably see people with signs that's welcoming the cosmic brothers and sisters to the world, you know, like we see in movies and stuff. But I always try and compare it to the reaction of something big, like how a lot of people reacted to the COVID pandemic over the last few years. We saw riots because of that, and we saw people handle it quite well and just get on with their lives as much as they could with lockdowns and things like that. So you know, everyone reacts differently. So I think it would literally be a mishmash of everything here, there, and everywhere, and then it would probably settle and die down. It depends as well on how the government would then keep communicating what they're doing now that it's out there. You know, are we just going to be left to our own devices and, like, there you go, have that, it's real, they're here, see you later? That would worry me.
Yeah. It's been great talking with you, Vinny.
Thank you, man.
But I just, for people listening, what else can they look forward to on Disclosure Team?
Well, in this side of Christmas, I'm obviously got some more interviews coming up on my YouTube channel. We're going to be digging into some experiencer cases, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to do a few more collaboration appearances with other YouTubers, like Sean Rash, Witness Citizen. We've got an 8-hour NDUAP secrecy special. I think that's December 17th. So we're going to have all sorts of guests there. I'm going to be co-hosting with him. I'm trying to finalize an article or something with all my findings from the National Archives with regard to the UK government and their lack of speaking about the subject. Yeah, and just general, who knows what can happen between now and Christmas as well with everything that's going on. So I'm just going to keep putting out the latest information as well on social media. So yeah, just keep doing what I'm doing, really.
And for your social medias, the links are going to be put in the description, but for people also listening, where can they find your social medias?
So my primary outlet, I suppose, is Instagram, and that is disclosure_team. But I'm also a bit more active on Twitter these days, which is Disclosure Team, and then an underscore straight after the team. So Disclosure Team _ on Twitter. And then on YouTube, it's just Disclosure Team. You should be able to find me.
All right, it's been great having you on, Vinny, and you know, again, I love your work. I know that I wake up in the morning and I want to know if something has gone down. I just go on Disclosure Team, and I know it's going to be there. I know it's going to
Thank you
be
so
there,
much.
like the important highlights. And you know, you're such a great dude, man. I really appreciate it. You know, I appreciate your energy, your vibe, kind of the way that you actually, you know, not just the way you engage with people, I think in a really good way, but with the information. You know, you're not saying this is this and you have to believe this. You're just saying, listen, this is the information, and you put it out in a very responsible and reasonable way. So I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. You've been a big inspiration of mine. So to hear that means the world. So thank you.
Yeah. So, and I look forward to speaking with you again and working with you again in any way possible. I'm sure it's gonna come up.
Absolutely, man. 100%.
Yeah. So everybody go check out Vinny's socials, Disclosure Team, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and we will speak to you all again soon. Take care, guys. Oh man, I have an issue here. Hold on.